If not, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? No opposition. The minutes are approved. All right, now we'll have a discussion on the updated census data, and I'll turn it over to Matt.
Right, let me go ahead and share my presentation with everyone. Okay, how does that pop up on everybody's end? Is it just the presentation?
Yes.
Yes,
I
I
see the presentation.
Perfect. If anything gets glitchy, just let me know. I think we're all having some internet issues these days. So what I'm going to be discussing today is an update from the ACS that was released in December on household components of change, or just household change in general. I'll get a little bit more into the specifics of the data as we move through. So this is going to be from our December 18th, 24 releases. It is the most recent data that has been released from the census. We are expecting that there will be a new update to the population projections that will be coming out in March. So hopefully we'll have some more to discuss with that. But as you all know, we're responsible in this group for producing the demographic forecasts. And this is just another component that can be used and kind of observed to help get a better idea of regional change. So this is going to be an expansion on the data that was presented to this group, I believe, last year as well. The ACS it's going to be expanded from July on. This data has a little bit more robust data on migration from households from county to county. So I figured that it would be a good discussion to have here. As I was saying, with the population estimates, we do have an expected release coming out in mid-March that will include updated components of change. So that will be able to see our natural increase, more up-to-date migration numbers for estimates there. We're also going to have a June data release, which is going to be able to show us population estimates by age, sex, race, and Hispanic origin. So for anyone using cohort component projection methods, that's going to be the data that is going to be the most rich and able to provide the best kind of population estimates that we're going to have. Again, they are estimates, they are not perfect, but it is going to be the best that is going to be produced alongside the ACS projections as well and estimates. So to move into it, we're going to look at regional change for households over time. So what we have here is from the most recent ACS. This is from the comparative tables. This is what was released in December, to where it will show the comparison between the 2 5-year projections of the most recent. So that will be 2014 to 2018, and then 2019 to 2023. So you can see here that household change over time, every region that we are looking at has shown a growth in households. We have experienced that same change in population with the increase, but this again is just looking at households. This is not the raw population count for each area. So this can be multifamily, single unit, etc. But what we are seeing is that all household or all areas have seen total household growth in this time. Also, anyone feel free to stop me with any questions as we go along. So what we see here is that with the exception of Baltimore City and County and Hartford, all areas were experiencing greater population movement from inter-county compared to intra-county movement. So this is showing movement from same county in the 2019 to 23 period, movement from different county, and movement from abroad. So that yellow is going to be your abroad. You'll see Howard County and Baltimore City had the largest account or the largest share of international household migration that is recorded within the ACS. And then moving from a different county, we see that those largest amounts are going to be in Baltimore and in Howard. So another interesting thing that did come up with this is that the majority of people throughout the region are maintaining their current residence, opposed to in the 2014 to 2018 ACS. So you can see here that in the 2014-2018, that's that green bar. You can see the increase in 19 to 23, where overall more residents are staying in place, with all counties showing a reduction in the share, both total numerical and percentage of households who are relocating within the past year. So we are starting to see a more stabilized and I guess non-mobile population.
Is there any insight on why that is? Could be, or
I would say there's a few potential reasons there, but I don't want to make too many predictions, but I would say this could be availability of housing, potential employment issues, anything like that that could determine migration. With that, I will defer to others.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. As I move up there and get to know more about the region, I can make a few more suggestions maybe in the future, but I would say that that is probably going to be due to housing availability. So to move on, we'll see that we're also seeing household relocations. So moving from different house, this is just another way of looking at what we were just saying. We're seeing fewer people that are moving to a different location. So again, more people are staying and maintaining in their current residence. This is showing movement in the same county. You will see in that 2014 to 2018, again, we saw a much larger share of movement within the same county than we're seeing in the 19 to 23 numbers. So we have domestic migration in the same county of residence. It's dropping across all counties in Baltimore City. And with Baltimore City and Carroll County, seeing those largest reductions in inter-county movement.
Matthew, do you have the errors associated with this, the margin of error?
I have it pulled up in the Excel sheet. I don't have the exact numbers right here. I think
sometimes it's helpful to add an error bar, like a range.
Yeah, for sure.
Only because what that does is it points out how valid these values are, how statistically significant they are. Because sometimes you might have a margin of error that's much greater than the difference between, for Howard County, for example, 5.4 and 4.3. If the margin of error is greater than that, then this data doesn't show, it actually doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it would just show stability over time.
So I think it's really important to show that, because otherwise you're presenting information that's not necessarily accurate.
Absolutely.
That's that's a pet peeve of mine. I see that all the time. Yeah.
I can definitely add that into the presentation before we have it posted. That way we can have that available. I don't remember any significant kind of statistical errors being pointed out in this, but I can of course double check it.
Okay. Yeah, because it is 5 years. So because it's 5 years,
exactly,
it may be good. Just when you get to these really small percentages, like in this example, it may skew things.
Definitely. So this is moving into, again, movement over time between different counties. And when we're looking at movement from different county from the previous year, this is a bit of a different narrative with the slowed movement because Anne Arundel, Hartford, Howard, and Queen Anne's show a decrease in movement across counties, with Carroll, Baltimore, and Baltimore City experience an increase in cross-county movement. So while these shifts aren't suggesting a drastic change, we are seeing that cross-county domestic migration may have more of an impact on population change comparing with inter-county movement. So from there, I'm just going to move on to some specifics for individual counties and areas. So first, jump into Anne Arundel, sorry. It's my accent coming out a little bit. Anne Arundel County experienced the largest numerical gain. We see about 16,000 households. Again, I can add these kind of margins of errors in later, but I don't really think that there was any significant concern with that, but it will be important to include. So we are seeing that, again, this is pretty much going to be across counties. The majority of people are staying in place. We're maintaining population, and we're seeing, I'm sorry? Sorry, I thought somebody had a question. So this decline in movement from counties and states suggests that, again, we're starting to see more self-contained populations with less movement. This is a overall discussion, or just a chart, which will show the components of change provided from the PEP from last year. So the population projections. This is just showing overall population change with natural change, so births and deaths and net migration. With these, you'll see that we have a significant drop in net migration for Anne Arundel, and then we're starting to see that natural change is starting to increase as well. So while migration may not be necessarily leading to population growth, there is still that growth occurring, or it is leading to it a little bit less than natural change. Here, this is just domestic migration, again, from the PEPs. This will be updated within the coming months, hopefully, and then we can provide a different projection to see if anything has really had a turn since we started looking at data post-pandemic. There is potential that migration will increase, and we'll go from there. But for now, we're seeing a drop across migration, which is leading to a little bit of a population loss. To Baltimore City, we see moderate increase, adding about roughly 12,000 households. This is, however, the second lowest rate of increase in the region. But again, we're looking at rates here, not total raw numbers. So again, there will be a little bit of room there. Overall, you're seeing that, again, 86% of people maintaining that same house, roughly 14% moving within. Your different county and your same county movements are roughly the same. And we're seeing stable international migration. So here, just again, presenting out that natural change. Again, with migration, you're seeing a net loss. So while net migration has been negative for each year in this analysis, it's been significantly negative since 2016. We have that low point in 2019 there, and then see we have somewhat of a pickup in migration numbers returning, but we are still seeing that net loss overall. In Baltimore County, adding the most households. This numerically, but still at a slower rate compared to overall regional growth. Looking at about a total population of about 850,000 now, with about 330,000 households, seeing roughly 90% of that population staying in the same house, which again, this is going to be the kind of narrative that this data is presenting, is that there has been less movement of households region-wide. Similar results here to where you can see that natural change kind of declining with a slight pickup right after the pandemic. And then again, with migration kind of having that dip in between the 15 to 2020, and then a slight uptick starting to occur here. Natural change has been trending downward since about 2014, with the exception of 2018, became negative in 2021. But growth via net migration has stayed in decline. So this is showing that domestic out migration combined with these declines in international migration is resulting in overall net migration losses throughout the county. International migration has remained positive in all these years, but has been in general decline since about 2015 to 2021, with that increase slowly coming back in those post-pandemic years as well. With Carroll County, we have the smallest percentage increase of about 5%, but this is also boasting the region's highest housing stability rate, with about 92.6% of residents reporting that they are within the same residence as they were in the year before. Very low movement. We see people from the same state, different state, and abroad. All of those household changes have remained relatively stable. And you're seeing natural increase was exceeding net migration for a while, and then with natural increase eventually starting to plateau out, you see that migration is going to be leading the majority of population growth and that component of change within the county itself. And you can see that again here with migration really ticking up in international, domestic, the net migration since 2015, minus that pandemic gap, has been on the increase. And in Hartford, you're seeing about 7.5% increase in total households, with again, around 90% staying within the same house. I think the lowest that we're going to see is about 84% who are staying there. We have consistent, this data is showing that there's consistency within staying within the same residence. So retaining more of its population, has higher percentage staying in the same house, fewer moving from different counties or states. So suggesting a more stable or stationary population. You can see here again, migration relatively holding pace with natural change as well. And about the same in migration. So to move on to Howard County, we're adding roughly 7,100 households with a growth of about 6.3%. Again, 88% staying within that same residence. We see same state movement within the same state, within a different state, and abroad remaining relatively stable. So we're not going to be seeing too much of a jump here. We're seeing a stable percentage of movement within the state and from outside. You'll see here that drop in migration that occurred from 2020, and it has started to rebound potentially within this next population estimates, whenever we get a little bit more robust migration data again, we'll be able to see if there has been a uptick in that or if it has remained relatively stable as well. Showing relatively the same results as what you just saw within the components of change model, just more specifically focusing on that drop in domestic migration while international migration is staying relatively stable and a little bit of an uptick. And lastly, we will move on to Queen Anne's County, which experienced an 8.2% increase, or about 1,500 households. That pretty significant jump. We're still seeing about 90% of residents remaining within their same house, we see domestic and international migration remaining relatively stable within this area. We have a very stable population here with little change in movement over time, at least. Again, this is what the data is showing us. You'll see natural change is relatively flat here, with migration leading any type of growth. And again, you'll see to where domestic migration is going to be the main driver here, with international migration remaining relatively low, but stable. So for our high points here, we'll see that the greater Baltimore region and Baltimore City are retaining more of their populations. We have fewer people moving from different counties and states, and a high percentage of residents who are staying in their same house or whatever their residence may be. Movement from within the state is stable or declining depending on the population, suggesting that the region is becoming more self-contained. Movement from abroad is maintaining relatively stable, and we're seeing some areas experience a slight decrease in that average household size. So indicating that we are starting to see around or following a national trend to where we see a decrease in that average household size and a potential increase in more single person households. I will add those margin of errors in here as well, but if there's any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, or also we can discuss it right now. But that is the end of the discussion on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from Matthew? I'll say for Queen Anne's County, I can definitely, those numbers kind of support that the new homes being built and the people moving in is probably the largest portion of that. We have a lot of people that have their existing homes, the homeowners in the county that have their existing homes that have been there with the low interest rates, certainly don't want to lose that interest rate and move. So I think that's been a big deciding factor. So I think with us, a lot of that increase has just been getting people into that brand new housing stock that's under construction, more recently.
Gotcha.
And then you always have a little bit of that movement around for divorce or people moving for school districts or employment, that type of stuff. That I think contributes it. But I think the housing costs and the interest rates are much higher deciding factors today than in the past.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions for Matt? Okay, then we'll move on to the Greg Goodwin for the next agenda item, which is going to be a MWCOG update forecasts. Greg?
Great. Good morning, everyone. Yeah. Again, thank you for the invitation to present today. I think it's always good to kind of show what we're doing down here in the DC region, and it's always nice to see kind of the data that Matt has been putting together for the Baltimore region. And I do like his previous presentation, and we have always on our end wanted to put something similar as well for the COG jurisdiction. So maybe that's something that we could work toward. So today I just want to spend a little bit of time about talking about the COG cooperative forecasting process. I have been with COG now for about 25 years, and I was never originally hired to work on the forecast, but generally I was more in terms of looking at economic development statistics and trends for the region, which basically evolved into being more associated with the forecasting process. So today I want to talk about the round 10.0 cooperative forecast that was adopted by our COG board of directors back in June of 2023. That is our latest and our most official set of forecasts for the Washington region. Also keep in mind that we do model a region that is slightly larger than the COG jurisdictions, transportation region. We actually include in our modeling process 3 jurisdictions within the BMC region, Anne Arundel, Carroll, and Howard. We do include the forecast data within our modeling process. But today's presentation, I'm really just going to center on so just to kick this off, today I'm going to just talk about kind of the purpose, the history of the process, kind of the performance of our data, talk a little bit about our new, or not the old, well, it is the old now, the regional economic inputs that we used for and just a little bit of information about the approval of the local round 10 forecast. Again, it was adopted in 2023. And then lastly, what I don't have on this slide is I want to talk a little bit about our current update that we are working on now. We have, starting in the fall, we started working on a 10.1 forecast. I want to give kind of an update on where we're at with that process. But right now, I'm just going to give some historical context for our forecasting process. So again, I have not been around since 1975. I was born a little bit before that, but the COG forecasting process has been around since 1975. That's when round 1 was. And again, very similar to the Baltimore region, we developed employment, population, and household forecasts at 5-year increments. For round 10, because we were developing it in a post-census, 2020 was our base year, and 2050 was our planning. And these are some of the official land use inputs for our transportation planning board. So for our transportation MPO process for modeling, the round 10 was used for the land use inputs in the modeling. And they are also used by different groups, different committees within COG, for water and air, for just a whole host of reasons. They're used by COG, and our local governments also use their numbers within their planning processes as well. So again, this is kind of the historical rounds of data that we have completed since 1975, 1976, starting with round 1. And we have pretty much produced a set of forecasts in terms of a major round every 4 or 5 years. The highlighted green are the major rounds, and the rounds with a decimal are kind of the intermediate rounds that we have produced. So again, not every jurisdiction participates in an intermediate round, but when we do a major round, we do have participation from all of our local government members. Again, round 10 was the last major round, and we are now currently working on an intermediate round 1. So just to kind of keep moving through this presentation. So the bottom red box is the process or the stage in which the local governments produces their local forecast. COG's responsibility is to develop an econometric model. It's an alternative set of regional projections that we rely on to compare to the sum of our local government numbers. We go through a process of kind of reconciling the local forecast with the econometric model. We tend to want to be like within 3 to 5% of our econometric model. And sometimes it takes a couple months in working with jurisdictions to kind of fine tune the jurisdiction numbers to be, when you sum them up, compare it to the econometric model, we want to be kind of within that 3 to 5 range. And once we feel like that, you know, we've done that and it's the best we can do, then we consider the data to be reconciled. So the final product that is developed by our local jurisdictions are the TAZ level data. Some jurisdictions will produce their jurisdictional level data based on developing the TAZs first. Other jurisdictions will, from a kind of a top-down approach, will develop jurisdictional totals and then distribute that down to the different TAZs within their jurisdiction. So this has been relatively the kind of a process for a number of years now. So again, you know, for developing round 10, we were kind of reviewed existing economic conditions. We were kind of in the post pandemic period, so there was still kind of a lot of uncertainty of the employment market at the time. For our region, we lost about 370,000 jobs between March of 2020 and April of 2020. So just right off the bat for 2020, even though it is our base year, we do have kind of all this interference of the pandemic impact on our jobs. But we did provide our local governments with a number of different data products to help them develop their base year. We use a product called Data Axle, and we purchased a kind of a pre-pandemic number and then like a September number years within the region, and we geocoded that data, did a little bit of quality control, and then gave that to our local jurisdictions for them to use in developing the TAZ. Again, we did produce a new econometric model forecast, and that provided an alternative set of regional numbers, 2020 to 2050. And again, we did reconcile the jurisdictional projections with regional econometric model. And then, as a final product round, we did receive the TAZ level data from our local governments. So again, just a little bit about our data for the econometric model. S&P Global is the vendor in which they produce jobs and households, population forecast at the county level. This is a product that they produce, I believe it's 3 times a year at the county level, and we were able to pull that data together to produce a model for COG region. So we were able to kind of compare the sum of the S&P data for the counties within the COG region and compare that to the sum of the local jurisdictional numbers. So just a little bit about S&P, you know, they model each state individually. It's linked up to the national projections, and something that I did find that essentially where people move, people will follow jobs. I think that was kind of a key takeaway from our work with our econometric model data. And some of the data that we've received in terms of the detail, we do get wage and salary job forecasts by sector for the COG region from the model. We also get some additional data that breaks out the population forecast into different age cohorts, and I do have a couple slides to show that. So again, you know, we had this alternative econometric model set of regional forecasts, and we kind of compare it to some of our local jurisdictions to see, you know, how close. And again, we feel like that is a strength of our process, that we're not just relying on what is being developed by our local jurisdictions, but we are trying to kind of work to see does it make sense? And I think our econometric model helps us in making that determination. So this is kind of like a really basic slide showing based on the NAICS super sectors. These are the different projections back in 2022. These are the assumptions for the model. So I'm sure they have changed in the last 3 years. But again, I think it shows kind of how much is on the ground now in terms of these different sectors and kind of the anticipated growth in these sectors between 2040 and 2050. It's interesting that even if you look at the changes in federal government, we were expecting that number to remain constant throughout the 30 years. Look back on the BLS data for the federal employment for this region, it's been relatively stable for 30 years. Model did not anticipate any more growth in government, federal government sector. Maybe $3,000 is what the actual numbers were. But we can see right now with what's going on with the current administration that we would probably anticipate lose several thousands of federal government jobs. That's something that we're hoping to craft over time. So, but again, this is just kind of showing how the data is broken into the different NAICS super sectors and the growth of those sectors between 2020 and 2050. Again, this is another chart. This is kind of the age cohort chart showing the sum of our local governments, which is the regional econometric model. This is the population. I think what really kind of is a striking number here is if you look on the right-hand side, the age 65 plus population is expected to grow from 757,000 in 2020 and will grow to over 1.2 million people by 2050. So obviously this data showing, and I think everywhere it's kind of showing that we are becoming much grayer. But what is interesting is that the age 1 to 14 is still relatively stable at around 1.1 million children in 2020. It's about 1.1. So again, how accurate are the forecasts comparing round 8 to some of the actual numbers from the 2020 census? In round 8, we were unfortunately a little high on the employment for 2020. There was a difference of about 300,000 or about 7%. I think some of this had something to do with the pandemic. I think if the pandemic had not occurred, our numbers might have been fairly close to what was being forecasted. So even 10 years before, 300,000 within 300,000, I think is a pretty good forecast. For population, we were close as well, within about 130,000 people compared to the round 8 forecast for 2020. And as always, our household forecasts are always stronger. So even 10 years before, we were forecasting within 20,000 of what the actual 2020 number was for households, and that's a pretty good forecast for round 8. So this is something that we do every so often. So again, some of the different tasks that we do for developing round 10, we did have a consultant that provided us some additional information about the impacts of COVID to our growth forecast. We also looked at developing a different range of forecast, a high and a low, kind of like a cone of uncertainty between the econometric model, and we stayed within those bounds. We also looked at changes to commercial space in our region. We also asked the consultant to look at any potential changes to future housing in the region. They were able to do some analysis for that. And also we were asking them to kind of look at any of the potential changes to average household size because of the pandemic. So again, this is just an example of some of the data that they were looking at. They were looking at metro transit ridership numbers. We were also looking at kind of the return to office occupancy data, just with some of the information. Discussion or to have some sort of additional information for development. This is the chemical occupancy data. You all have, these little cards that we flash or we put in front of a sensor to count our returning to work and all that. And, some of this data is based on that type of technology. And again, this is some of the data that we are continuing to track after 3 or 4 years. So again, we were looking at some other information. This is a slide from Brookings in terms of office utilization trends. Obviously, a big portion of our employment in our region is based on office jobs. And this was some information that we were able to glean at the Brookings Institute that discussed that meeting. Again, looking at average household size, this is kind of the historical trend of household size for the Cullog region. Interesting, 1970, it was as high as 3.1. In 2020, based on the decennial census, that number dropped to about 2.65. And based on the round 10 forecast, we are looking at household size to continue to decline ever so slightly. But there's been some data out there that is showing that in the short term it's kind of it's increasing in some jurisdictions, whereas other jurisdictions it's still fairly stable and flat. But yeah, this will be an interesting and an important trend that we will need to continue to observe over time. So again, make this real quick. In terms of the final round 10 data, 3.2 million jobs in the forecast for 2020. That number expected to grow by about a million more jobs, 4.2 million in 2050. Population in 2020 was around 5.7 million. That number is to increase to about 7.2 million by 2050. And then the household number, 2.1 million households in 2020. And that number is to increase to about 2.8 million in 2050. Again, some of the significant changes compared to the previous round, 9.2. We really did reduce the amount of employment for the region. This is a comparison table between the 9.2 forecast and the round 10 forecast. So obviously, jobs were something that our jurisdictions went back, reassessed. This is the regional difference of about 200,000 fewer jobs in the forecast compared to again, population and households. There are some differences, but obviously I would characterize the differences between round 2 and round 10 to be more employment significant than the other two forecasts. Again, this kind of shows the amount of growth in the different 5-year increments. And I'll be the first one to say we are not seeing this amount of growth in employment in our region short term. Still relatively flat from the pandemic. It's my understanding, looking at some of the QCW data, we are just really just getting back for some jurisdictions have increased their employment, but overall, most of our jurisdictions are just kind of getting back to where they were pre-pandemic. Again, this is kind of looking at the population in terms of the different 5-year increments. for the Cog region. Again, we're still relatively flat regarding population. Some growth, but not as much as what we were assuming around 10 forecast. And then this is the companion growth for households based on the round 10 forecast. So again, you know, these numbers were developed in 2022. They were approved by the COG board in 2023. Now in 2025, some jurisdictions are taking another look at their forecast, and that's what we are expecting to see for 10.1. So again, at the jurisdictional level, and I'll kind of move through this presentation, the District of Columbia will have the most number of jobs in the COG region, around 786,000 in 2020. That is expected to grow to about 236,000 more jobs by 2050. But again, you know, we're not seeing as much growth in jobs in 2024. Fairfax County was the next fastest growing in terms of jobs for our round 10 forecast. In terms of our population, Fairfax County is the most populous county in the COG region at about 1.2 million people in 2020, and they're expected to 12,000 more people between 2020 and 2050. That's followed by Montgomery. And as you would expect in terms of household growth, Fairfax County has the most households in the region at about 418,000. They're expecting, based on their forecast, around 10, to add about another 93,000 households by 2050, followed by Montgomery and Sherman County. So again, you know, just to kind of sum up the trends, the region's expected to add about 1 million more jobs between 2020 and 2050. I would expect that number over the next couple of rounds will probably be reduced as we start looking at data and start looking at what trends that we're seeing with that. And based on our kind of metric model, 3 out of every 4 new jobs are expected to be in service industry. Business services would see the largest growth with 252,000 more jobs. And the region's population is expected to grow by 1.5 million people during the 2020-2050 time frame. And between 2025 and 2030, about 209. So again, you know, as I had shown earlier in our age cohort, population is growing steadily, nearly all age cohorts, but the fastest growing age cohort is at 65 years and above, about 64%. And nearly 700,000 new households are expected in our region. And our average household size, again, just based on the previous slide that you saw, is expected to decline again beginning in 2025. So again, some of the next steps with round 10, it was approved by the COG board in June of 2023, but we did go to the COG board twice with presentations. It was something that the COG board was very much interested in seeing more of what our process was all about. That's what we provided in April, and then in May, there was a more detailed presentation on the jurisdictional level forecast. So from the COG board perspective, which is the highest level board at COG, made up of our elected officials, there was a lot of interest in the forecast, a lot of questions about the impact of the pandemic and all of that, but eventually they were adopted in June of 2023. Right now, this is our latest set of projections that have been adopted by our COG board. So, so beginning last summer, we were approached by a number of jurisdictions to make revisions to the cooperative forecast. So we provided an opportunity for jurisdictions to make either jurisdictional level revisions to their data or make corrections to the TAZ level data. So whenever we do an intermediate round, It's not mandatory like a major round for all jurisdictions, but it's an opportunity for jurisdictions to kind of go back and take a look at their short-term um, forecast based on kind of the current economic and population outlook. And we did have a number of jurisdictions that took us up on going back and reassessing their forecasts. So right now, we're kind of in that process of evaluating the data. The COG, Cooperative Forecasting and Data Subcommittee, is kind of actively reviewing the numbers. And some of the checks that we look for is just making sure that it's reasonable. So some of the quality control checks that we'll be making is we'll be comparing the TAZ level data for 10.1 to round 10, just making sure that either which TAZs increased or declined, making sure that those seem appropriate. Add kind of a rationale for making those. Of course, we're going to be making some checks for household size. We look for anomalies for TAZs in which there's households, but there's no household population. So we look for those types of changes at the TAZ level and have those corrected before we submit a data set for our transportation modeling program. And again, just making some of these basic checks of just making sure that the TAZ level data does in fact match the jurisdictional totals. And for this round, we just want to make sure that everything kind of matches up with what has been adopted by our top board of directors. So just about to the end. So we did have a number of jurisdictions that will be making revisions to their forecast for round 10s. For 10-1, we're expecting new jurisdictional totals for the city of Alexandria. Montgomery County, it is my understanding that their jurisdictional totals are not changing, but they're making changes at the TAZ level. Rockville, though, will be making jurisdictional totals, but it will not affect the overall total of Montgomery County. Prince George's County will be making some minor revisions to both their jurisdictional and which will make revisions to their TAZ level data. Fairfax County has population and household forecast changes to make. Their employment data will not change for 10-1. And for Loudoun County, we are expecting to receive new jurisdictional totals, which in fact do our TAZ level data for 10.1. And then Prince William County will be making changes at the TAZ level, but not at the jurisdictional level. So their totals are not changing, just changes at the TAZ level to take into account new plans and changes like that. So again, kind of looking at what we're seeing for 10-1, not a significant change in the regional totals between 10 and 10-1. This is almost identical to what you just saw a few minutes ago for round 10. We're not seeing much of a change at the regional level, but this is what, when we look at the potential changes that these jurisdictions are making, this is what the new totals for the region will reflect. So again, not much of a change at the regional level, but it is an opportunity for jurisdictions to kind of fine tune some of their assumptions for their short term. And we did see some of the jurisdictions take it. I would like to make a note. The District of Columbia did not have the staff capacity to make revisions to their forecast, but I would expect probably that they would lower maybe their employment in the short term in the next round that we do. So 10-2 or around 11, I would expect we would see some changes of the district and some other jurisdictions. So again, just in terms of kind of the change between round 10 and 10-1, again, you know, these are these little subtle changes. Again, in some of these later years, you know, it's just a difference of about, you know, 12 or 13,000 jobs, 20, 30. The difference between round 10 and 10-1 was around 20,000. So again, this is not even, this is close to like a 0.5% change between 10 and 10-1. But again, it's more of an opportunity to give the jurisdictions an opportunity to kind of make these changes to their jurisdiction. That's why we did this. Have that opportunity. And again, you know, these are the difference between the 2050 number for round 10 and 2.1. 6,000 more jobs for 2050 compared to round 10. Again, not even 0.5%. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of evaluating the jurisdictional data. Right now, we are still kind of working with the forecasting committee with reviewing the numbers. We're hoping to proceed with that over the next month or two. We are hoping that we do get some sort of acceptance from the forecasting group to be able to go to the planning directors for more of a discussion around 10.1. Again, it's not a significant change between roads, and so I don't expect jurisdictions to be concerned. The appreciation of being able to make some tweaks for 10.1, and I think some jurisdictions took advantage of that for this round. So April, May, final review, approval by our two committees to looking at some sort of adoption this summer or early fall. Do not have may very well slip to September. So that's it. That's kind of where the process is, and happy to take any questions. But I kind of blended this presentation to give you kind of an idea of what our methodology, what our process has been with round 10, and then just giving you some insight in terms of what we're working on now with our 10.1. Again, not a significant change from round 10, but I would expect in future rounds we would see more jurisdictions making revisions, and we could potentially see fewer jobs in our forecast based on what we're seeing with federal government reductions and all of that. So again, I don't think that those types of assumptions are going to be included. One, obviously, we have been receiving jurisdictional data starting in December. So some of the changes that we're seeing now, some of the jurisdictions just did not include that. But I would expect in the future, possibly in 10.2 or 10.3 or the next major round, we'll start seeing some changes to the so I'll stop there and stop sharing my screen and take any questions.
So with the recent changes in policy in your area, are you going to immediately move into a 10.2?
You know, this is kind of like just my feeling. I was really hoping that the district would have participated in our 10.1, not just with what we're seeing with the decline in federal employment, but just in the last couple of years, just overall, the amount of growth within the district and the four jurisdictions is just not where or what we had projected. So I was a little disappointed that they didn't participate, but obviously, you know, everyone here on this committee understands, you know, staff capacity and what they're able to work on. They just were not able to do this for 10.1. But I would expect for 10.2, we might very well see some of these policy changes to the forecast. Obviously, you could, you know, go into a particular zone maybe and pull out, say, USAID jobs out of the forecast. I mean, obviously, there could be an opportunity for local governments to do that. But again, all that is like happening right now. Every day there seems to be new information about what agencies. And unfortunately, we just have a lot of federal jobs. We have about, according to BLS, we have about 375,000 federal government jobs. So I would expect, you know, over the next several months and years, we might start seeing BLS data showing these types of reductions. And obviously it's a concern by our committee members, and hopefully in the next round or two, we'll be able to capture that reality.
Great. A lot of information and data there. Anybody, questions, comments for Greg? Al?
Yeah, it's kind of a sombersome, right now we're just being bombarded with a lot of information, a lot of confusion about what federal workers are compared to what a federal job is. And we're having to explain that the ACS data is not at place employment, it's where federal workers live. And that is some information that we have been mining from the 2023 ACS. We're hoping to produce some maps at the census tract level showing the concentrations of federal workers, not where the jobs are, but where the workers live. And we're hoping to show and be able to tell a story about where these workers are within the coverage. We're actually looking at maybe expanding and doing some mapping for some areas in Maryland and Virginia as well.
I mean, I would think that the federal job situation and the cuts might affect the population and the housing, because particularly in the DC area, because people, move and live to where their jobs are. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
It might not just affect jobs, it might affect everything.
Yeah, it will affect everything. And I don't know what it is, but there's got to be some sort of multiplier effect that with every elimination of one federal job, that must have some sort of impact on other types of jobs and federal spending and just everyday spending. And so I don't know what that multiplier effect is, but that's something that we might have to get some additional help to help us, identify that. For every federal job, we expect to lose, a federal, or not a federal, but
Yeah, because it's a domino effect. It's not
Yeah.
just the loss of a job. It's this, and that. Then it's the economy, and it's got a way to play it.
Yeah, I
it's
would
going to play
expect
out.
I would expect that, we'll have, unfortunately, some sort of foreclosure among some of these workers and some people who will be unable to be able to rent. And, so there is going to be kind of a larger impact. And unfortunately, we're just like a month or so into this. But I would expect that, over time, we'll start seeing more data that shows.
Particularly after the 8 months, if
Yeah. I mean, what I could say is BLS does have they do track federal employment at the state level and at the MSA level. So we can track that. The Washington MSA, as you would expect, is a little bigger than our COG region. So it's not an apple to apple comparison, but that's a number that's reported monthly, and that's something that we're prepared to look at as well. And then also the QCW data, I would say, it's kind of lagging. I think the third quarter of 2024 was just released. And I would expect as that data moves into calendar year 2025, we could expect to see some reduction in jobs. And, so we'll just have to see. There's lots of data. There's lots of, people talking. But what I really see is that there's kind of a confusion where people are kind of saying workers and at place jobs are the same thing, and they're not. We do have, a lot of federal workers that live like in a place like Montgomery County, but their physical job is actually like within the district. So, there is that commuting aspect of this that we need to be mindful.
I was also curious, do workers that are getting the payouts or the benefits, can they apply for unemployment? Are they going to show up in unemployment stats, or are they not collecting it until, how does that work?
Well, it's my understanding that if you are a Montgomery County resident, so you are a federal worker counted in Montgomery County, if you are to collect unemployment insurance, you would go through DC if your job is physically located in the District of Columbia. So you would not be applying for unemployment insurance through the state of Maryland. You would be applying through the district
But if
process.
you're receiving those benefits or payouts for 8 months, are you allowed to apply for, I mean, I'm just wondering if they're going to show up in the stats.
Yeah, I don't have all the details for that. I think that's a good question. I think we'll hear more stories about how these layoffs are occurring. I'm sure there'll be a number of articles about workers' experience of kind of navigating the whole benefits. I'm not exactly sure, what the federal employee is getting in terms of taking this buyout. Sounds like they would be paid through the month of September, and then they would collect that pay, but then their job would be eliminated. I'm not 100% sure on what if you're collecting that, whether or not you can collect unemployment insurance through the states. But that's something that we'll probably learn more about over the next coming weeks or months.
All right, thank you.
And those unemployment filings, that's great that you've raised that. I have been looking at some different sites for that type of information, and it is reported up to, I believe, the Department of Labor from the state. So Virginia Employment Commission, I believe in Maryland, it's the Department of Labor. In DC, it's the Department of Employment Services. They all provide information to the federal agency for that information. I do think that information is going to be reported out on a monthly basis, but it's going to be reported out at the state level. It would be really interesting to kind of get the breakdown if the data was available. Interesting. But right now, what I'm seeing is just at the state level is what you're to look at.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Greg? Greg, thanks for being here. Thanks for the presentation. It was a lot of information. We really appreciate it, and good to see how you guys are doing it so we can kind of compare to what we do. And we also appreciate you attending our meetings on a regular basis. So, it's always good to have your perspective here. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And I think, I'd like to end this on, something that I think would be really important is that if jurisdictions are looking at federal worker data from the ACS, I think it would be interesting to see, what particular table are you looking at in terms of class of worker? As we all know, there are multiple tables and, different places where you can slice and dice all this information. It would be interesting to hear, from Alfred about, what's going on, with Maryland Department of Planning and what they're looking at, what tables are they looking at for ACS? I think it would be good, to kind of get an understanding of what we're looking at. I think the 5-year ACS, I think, is really important for us because we're able to get down to jurisdictions that have less than 65,000 people. So from my perspective, that's important that we can share and show that data for some of our smaller jurisdictions. So if you were to look at the ACS 1 year, you wouldn't be able to show some of these our smaller jurisdictions. So the 5 years is kind of where we're going at this
point. Okay. Al, did you have? Okay. All right. Anything else? Any other questions, comments? All right, Greg, thanks again. We really appreciate it, and lots of information. And with the changing times, we're all paying attention and be following the information as it comes out. So thank you. All right, next on the agenda, we have the Post-Pandemic Trends Project, which has been in process for some time. Matt's going to give us an update on where we are with that. Thanks.
All right, everybody. Let's share the screen again. Okay. So, as Steve just pointed out, we're going to be talking through our post-pandemic trends report. So, as I'm sure a good bit of you know, this was a commission project through ACOM and WBA that BMC contracted out. This was to conduct a survey on post-pandemic trends for employees and employers across the region. So this is going to be regarding commuter travel, worker satisfaction, work from home trends, policies and preferences, both presently and expectations moving forward. So what we can see here is that we have a sample of 1,630 employees and 77 employers that were sampled and contained within this response. I have a little bit more of a breakdown on the next slide for this, where you can see for the employee surveys of that 1,630, we have our breakdown for the region for Baltimore all the way down to Queen Anne's. And to the side of that, I included a table from the Round 10 forecast for employment, just to show that the response rates, with the exception of Anne Arundel, were relatively proportional to the expected employment size, to where we can kind of have that comparative understanding of these responses. So again, relatively distributed out with that employment population or projected employment population. So for our sample demographics, what we're looking at is that education is that 60% hold a bachelor's degree or higher, with about 29% having a graduate degree. So right up front, we're seeing that these, the persons who were surveyed are going to be highly educated and are going to be within a type of specific income or economic bracket. We've got household composition is 64% of employees have households with no children. So again, not directly representational. Household income, 31% earn 150,000 or more. Median income was 99,870. Housing type, detached single family homes. And we have that average age of around 47, with 28% being aged 55 to 64. And in general, we have a pretty decent breakdown by gender. We see 55% of the respondents were female, with 44% as male. 1% was not identified within a binary gender. And for race, we see 59% being white Caucasian and 41% identifying as a person of color. So for our employees for the surveys, they were asked a range of questions that took on average about 15 minutes to complete, with these questions concerning topics centering on 4 key topic areas. So this would be their job title and their company, whether or not they were working from home, their commuter status at present and before workplace and travel restrictions that were implemented in response to COVID, and what employment is like now, and what they expect it to be in the future. This also included the questions that regarded those demographics earlier as well that I just presented. For employers, this took on average about 8 to 10 minutes to complete and covered those 4 topic areas as well, with company designation, their current workforce, issues surrounding transportation and workforce availability. This included issues with telecommuting, potential changes in the future, and questions that would help in us developing a more comprehensive profile of the companies that were being surveyed. So what we see here is going to be the best description of employees' current and ideal work environments. So what these survey results are indicating is that in the first half of 2024, almost 2/3 of employees were working entirely or mostly in person, while only 1/8 were working entirely remotely. There's a nice caveat here that these survey results do indicate that those who say they work mostly in person work almost entirely in person. So this is going to account for about 23 and 41% of employees having some degree of hybrid employment. And overall, 95% of employees were employed by companies that have a physical work location available in the area. So only 5% of these employees surveyed were working for an organization that did not have a physical location nearby. We see with key trends that while these results were widespread, respondents 44 and younger were more likely to prefer hybrid versus fully in-person work, and that women were more likely than men to want fully remote work. The note with the latter here is that the majority of women still wanted a work situation that was at least partially in person. So this is going to provide a general overview insight into what employees were looking for and their expectations in their work environments. So results are indicating that employees desire more flexibility in their work schedules, availability of remote work options, pay transparency, and overall recognition and reward. There wasn't much variance that was accounted for across industries, though in-person and historically lower paying jobs such as food service and retail were often the least likely to seek or expect these flexible work from home and remote work options. And that this data also indicates that employees value access to resources along with accommodations that promote accessibility, flexibility, and flexibility in their work schedule. And this also includes the desire for flexibility and more control over the number of hours worked. These findings do indicate that about a sixth of respondents indicated flexibility at work that allowed for maintaining a proper work-life balance, or that they didn't have enough control over when or where they work. So about a sixth of the respondents. So in all, over 50% of respondents indicated that they lacked the flexibility at work to maintain their desired work-life balance. About 3/10 of those surveyed reporting that they have considered changing jobs or have actively explored external positions in that time. So these are going to be our limitations of the current work environment. So this is going to be a agreement statement to where we're going to be looking at the variables that we have here. These findings are indicating that, again, about a sixth of respondents indicate that flexibility that is going to be allowed. With back to office, we did see that there is a disconnect in the perceived intentions of employers versus employer or by employees and their employer actual intentions. So the survey results show that most employers do not expect much change in their current work situations or planned work arrangements. Whereas employees are expecting a greater return to in-person work or are simply not sure of the future and what it may bring for their work arrangements. Responses show that about only 5 of the employers surveyed plan to require employees to return in person. So of the 77, that's around 6% who are saying that they have intentions to bring their employees back fully in person. And 3 of those employers were saying that there was direct incentives that they plan to offer to encourage employees to return to in-person work, such as designating a new or designing a new office space, and potentially hosting more events in office. So again, these survey results are suggesting that while employers may not see a coming change in work arrangements, employees, while may not be presented with this are still expecting that there may be a change in those work arrangements in the future. So here we're seeing employee and employer understanding of what is driving work from home and what's driving that desire for that. So employers are seeming to understand that employees want to avoid congestion, which was one of the primary reasons employees wanted to work from home. However, these findings are showing that employees also want to work from home to save money on commuting, spend more time with friends, and providing care to friends and family members. Both of those reasons that were not mentioned as much by employers as they were by employees. So you can see with congestion, around 43% of employers see that this is a main reason for their employees' desire for work from home. 81% of employees see congestion as this main reason. Comparing with saving money, this is a huge employee concern. Roughly 79% of respondents see that this is their main reason. 8% of employers see this as a concern, and roughly half of employees see the concern with time for friends and family. Employers are, again, not directly sharing that kind of proportional understanding, with about 14% thinking that this is a core reason. When employees were asked if they had remote workers from outside the Baltimore area and whether they would hire new employees outside of that area, half of the surveyed employers do have residents outside of the Baltimore area, and said that they would be willing to hire from outside the metropolitan region as well. So we are seeing that there is the intent or the availability for those jobs to not directly be within the region itself. This speaking specifically to commuting, we're seeing that while commuting to work is down across all modes of transportation, since these disruptions are brought on by the COVID pandemic, we have a greater proportional impact on public transportation than we do on driving. So with driving current, we see about 12% versus that, 1 to 2 days per week is the 12 and 7%, 3+ days per week, 69 and 62% currently, and then versus public transportation, which is down from 12% to 6% who are using that 3 or more days a week.
Oh, on the 3+ days per week, I mean, some of the typical hybrid is 3 in the office and 2 out, 2 at home or outside the office. So to me, that doesn't surprise me then that that's high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great note there. So the respondents were segmented off into different employee groups by variables. I'll explain that a little bit more on the next slide. But what we're looking for here is understanding what the employment market would look like versus on where people live, what portion of the market they represent, how they behave, different perceptions and behaviors. So there was a cluster analysis that was done, and grouping was done based on similarities and with differences. I am not including the high-level math that was done for this. It is included in the report, which is linked in the chat, and I can answer any questions later on if they do arise. So of the 157 variables that were originally included, 21 of these variables were used in the factor analysis for clustering. So these variables with high correlation coefficients with other variables were excluded to avoid the potential issues with multicollinearity that may occur. Then we have a variance inflation factor, which was used to segment these groups off. So ultimately, 21 variables, those shown right here in this table, were selected from that 157 to break these employees down into these categories or clusters based on their characteristics. The segmentation that was finalized on is shown here in this pie chart. So we'll start with our largest group, which is the flexible free spirits, so about 24%. Moving on down to hybrid harmony achievers, we see resilient essential workers, comfortably remote professionals, grounded workplace leaders, and then our smallest group is frustrated flex seekers. So I'm going to go into a little bit more of how these categories were broken down and who these employees are meant to be representative of. So our comfortably remote professionals, we are seeing that these are full-time, mid-level, frontline, white-collar office workers, 5 days a week. More than half of them are working from home or have the availability to do so. They desire remote work, flexible schedules, and increased pay transparency. And they are not driving as much or using public transit as much as they were. So in short, not commuting. Our frustrated flex seekers, these are full-time white collar, mid and upper level managers working in person. More are expected to be in the future. They do feel that they lack control over their jobs and are considering leaving or have actively looked. They're largely looking for remote work, flexible schedules, and of course, increased pay transparency. Next, we see our resilient essential workers. This is going to be a mix of part and full-time workers, largely in service industry and manual labor. They would like more hybrid work opportunities, but don't see that as a true availability or something that is actually possible within their current work schedules. Those who do work from home feel distracted and often have trouble working from home. Either that is due to availability of software, hardware, or just general connection with those that they are working with. They are using a mix of transportation modes to and from work. This is going to be a mixture between our in-person single vehicle commute versus public transit. Our grounded workplace leaders, they're working full person in time, middle, upper management, or in customer service. They are generally happy with their jobs, which are offering them more opportunities for decision making. This is the group that has changed the least since COVID. So the least impact that we are seeing is within this 8%. And this is the segment that drives the most. So our commuters and single occupancy or single vehicles are going to be here. The 24% of flexible free spirits, this is working part-time, often in person for small companies, with a good chunk of them being self-employed. So we're going to see this in being the type of gig workers and gig economy as that would fit into this. They're satisfied with their jobs. It offers few perks, but it does offer the flexibility that they are looking for, and the availability to manage their free time and spending time with family, friends, potential caregiving. And then there is hybrid harmony achievers. They work full-time in healthcare and other white-collar professions. They do sometimes have hybrid schedules with greater flexibility, which does assist with their lifestyles. They're satisfied and stable in their jobs, not expected to change in their company's work from home plans, and do not drive a lot because they don't necessarily commute that much. And finally, we have our restless job seekers. So they work in person full-time in customer service, manual labor, healthcare, industrial, and education. They are looking for other employment if it is available, either in person or hybrid. Again, looking for more pay transparency and an increase in flexible schedules. When they do work remotely, they often take advantage of that, but particularly this is the group that identified spending time with family and friends as a key concern of theirs for working from home and hybrid work.
I have a question. When you say pay transparency, what exactly does that mean?
Pay transparency can both mean both within the organization, so employees being aware of other employees' salaries as well, but this is also upfront within the hiring phase itself, to where pay transparency can be included at that point as well.
So they want to know that their pay is equitable with other people in the same company. Okay.
And across companies as well.
Okay.
So next, I just want to break this down into some preliminary county level results. Overall, in the total sample, so of those 1,630 employees, we see 80% of them are working one job, working mostly 31 to 50 hours a week. We're seeing 50% or more are satisfied with their current work schedule and workplace accommodations. 1 in 5 or fewer feel that they lack the flexibility or control over work-life balance. 60% worked fully in person before COVID, but now 10% work fully remote. So except for Queen Anne's Canada, which did include a little bit of a difference there. And 20% of remote workers are taking advantage of that opportunity in order to take care of family members while they are working from home. In Anne Arundel, we're seeing 40% are working that 31 to 40 hours a week. So your roughly average in-office schedule, with about 50% of those being in-office roles. We see high job satisfaction and a low likelihood of changing jobs. There is the disparity here that their companies are either very small with fewer than 20 employees or very large with 5,000 plus. Again, this could be a natural product of the response rates of the employees that were sampled here, or our employers. In Baltimore City, we see employees are more likely to prefer to work entirely in person, ideally, compared with Baltimore County, to where employees were generally similar to their counterparts from other counties and not standing out on many other matters of satisfaction or preference. In Carroll County, least likely to have company monitoring while working from home. So this will be a various amount of, or different types of, whether it be software or other internal maintenance, but they do not feel that they are being consistently monitored while they are working from home. Most likely to avoid traffic congestion when working remotely. In Hartford, we see least satisfied with control over their work location, timing and methods of being able to participate in work, and they're least likely to consider changing jobs or do household chores while working from home. In Howard County, significantly more likely to be hybrid or not working from home at all. In Queen Anne's, again, with the small sample size, these results need to be interpreted a little bit cautiously, but it did have the highest proportion of employees who did report a disability. Again, just high-level takeaways. There is more data in there that we can discuss as well. So our key takeaways, again, preliminary kind of results, is that most employees are satisfied with their jobs and work schedules, but the preferences for in-person versus remote do vary significantly by county. Carroll and Arundel counties stand out for remote work benefits, again, looking to avoid congestion and having higher satisfaction within those jobs. With Hartford County, employees are feeling less control over their work, while Baltimore County or Baltimore City employees are preferring in-person work. And Queen Anne's is a bit of a standalone on its own, and we may need to look a little bit further into there or interpret those results a little lightly due to the reduced sample size. And again, feel free to reach out with any questions that may pop up after this. Todd will likely have a much better understanding of this from the past than I will. But again, this is what we are seeing purely from that data point of view.
Are you going to be sending out the study?
So we provided a link to the phase 1 report in the chat.
Excellent. Okay.
And we'll be
And as I
receiving,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
we will be receiving all the presentations
Correct.
today. Okay.
Well, again, we post all the presentations online in the cooperative forecasting group area, along with the recording and the minutes. So it'll take probably a day or two to get most of the presentations posted.
Todd, and when we say the phase one, what phase one, phase two, what's the breakout or the?
Sure. Yeah, so phase one was the survey data, basically the employees and employers. And then the second phase is looking more at kind of the real estate and then also projections, how this could affect how we look at, the next round and what we might want to take into account for these different types of work from home situations, things like that.
Okay, great. Because we, in pushing this project forward, that was a key part of what we were trying to achieve, to try to, are these short-term impacts from just the COVID blip, or are these going to be long-term trends that we have to incorporate into our forecasting? So, okay. No, thanks for the update. Very helpful, very informative. And any other questions or comments on the study?
When you were talking about the discrepancy, from the small employer and then the employers with 5,000 plus jobs, that made me think, is there a high percentage of federal workers that got captured in the survey? That perhaps the ones that were working for employers that had 5,000 plus jobs?
We could go back and take a look. I don't think anyone specified, as to whether or not they were a federal employee or not. So, but we might be able to infer some information. Yeah.
So there's no breakdown as to the employers or industry, or
They do have some info on industry, but let me go ahead and dive back into the study. Again, there were a number of different questions, about 70 questions for employees to answer. So we do have a good breakdown, and the report itself is about 150 pages with a lot of different charts and things. So, there is a good level of detail, but I'm not sure if we asked kind of some of those specific questions.
okay. All right, thank you.
And the report in the link, that was prepared by WA Research.
Yeah, so the lead firm is AECOM, and they had a surveying firm, WBA, do the research on the survey.
Okay. And then did you got the B, so it looks like it's in the B, like the BMC format. Did you guys take their study and recraft it, or are we looking at the original study that they came up with?
Yeah, we actually gave them our style guide, so
Okay.
they created this document, within the style of BMC.
All right, thank you.
So, Matt, what was the time frame of the study? Because recently the patterns have changed and the federal workers have been asked to come to work in the office and whatnot. And our work schedules have also changed. Initially it was 2 days a week, now it's 3 days a week and whatnot. So again, as we are getting away from the pandemic era, it's the work in the office is becoming normal like it was before. So just one curious what the time period when the study was done.
I'm not mistaken, it was done from mid-February, so February 19th through April 10th is whenever it was conducted.
That's
2024.
Yeah.
Okay.
2024.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because I mean, maybe when did we decide to do this study? For some reason, I thought it's good that it's in 2024, but I thought we started this in 2023.
So we adopted the budget with this project in 2023, and
Got
then
it.
the
Okay.
project started again,
Yeah.
kind of late 23 into early.
Right. So it makes sense. That's good that it's 2024. And then, of course, as Al was saying, now things are completely changed, right? With
Right.
administration. So
Right. And,
that's not
we
how-
did our latest household travel survey. I spent $1.2 million on
Oh,
that,
geez.
and it was 2018, 2019. And of course, it immediately became obsolete. So
Yeah, right. I mean, the world changes, right? So yeah.
and again, we're getting some of the draft phase 2 products right now. So hopefully, I'm not sure about the next CFG meeting, but probably into the early summer, we'll be able to kind of produce the rest of those and do a presentation and publish them.
Nice.
Great. Anything else on that? Anybody? All right. Thank you very much for that presentation, Matt. Next on the agenda, we have suggested topics for 2025 meetings. Matt is looking for material.
Something I find interesting, at least for Carol Callany working on the master plan, I found the ag census data. And also did do some charts on the ag census that captured other counties. So, I mean, I thought some of the information there is quite interesting. So, particularly for the counties that have, some significant agriculture. So,
Absolutely.
We have some ag census information posted on the website. I'm going to post a link here. If you're curious to see, it might be helpful. And I have a couple of suggestions, Matt. One thing I promised, like I was going to make a presentation on our population predictions. We haven't finalized them yet. It's hate to say this, a lot of other things going on with the legislative session going on in Maryland. But maybe next CFG meeting, I'm not going to promise, but like if we have like a finalized version on our end, I would be more than happy to present our predictions, because there has been a lot of variation from what BMC is predictions for individual jurisdictions are. In the past, we have always, most of the time, we have used BMC's jurisdictions predictions, but like we are deviating a little bit. I'm going to explain the reasons why in our predictions when we present them, hopefully. And the other topic to consider is with a BEA not producing jobs data at the jurisdiction level, what source would BMC consider, or maybe even Greg can weigh in on this too, like as a supplement or surrogate to when you are looking at the jobs and the jobs predictions going in the future. We were considering the QCWPLS data and the proprietors information is, we have always adjusted the BMC and MWCOG, and even MDP adjusts the proprietors jobs because BEA data is fairly high. Maybe somebody from BLS or BEA can help us with the presentation, like a speaker, or any suggestions along that topic might be a good idea, because that's data that's not available. If you go to the BEA site, it says we are no longer produced. This is actually not due to the new administration. It's before that happened, I guess, like, due to budgetary constraints. They're not producing the data.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just echo what Al just said, that COG was relying on the military estimation of active duty employment, and Al's right, that data has been discontinued. So we're looking for an alternative data source as well for some of the BEA data. So yeah, this would be a really interesting topic to talk.
also, on the map is an interesting site showing commuting data, direction of commuting data. I mean, direction of travel in and out. So I don't know if anybody's looked at on the map, but I find it interesting.
Interesting is a good way to put it, because like I see commutations from Worcester County going to Allegheny County on the map data, which doesn't make sense, but it is probably because of the data massaging they do. So individuals cannot be identified, but seems like that's the best source out there that's more current. And they don't have an update cycle that's can be relied on. I believe the latest data set they have is from 2022 on the map data. But,
Right, it's 2022.
yeah, the ACS commutations might be something to look at. That seemed a little more reasonable in terms of not two outliers. Like you wouldn't believe me, like there's commutations from Maryland to Oregon or something, which doesn't really make sense. But it's probably where the headquarters is located and where the employees are and all that. So might be a satellite office here, but they didn't code it right. So
Or maybe like evaluating different sources to get commuting data.
yeah.
The legislative session was brought up, and I know Governor Moore just released a lot of economic development initiatives, or has a direction he would like to move with jobs, employment, and housing. I personally have not paid attention to it, but if there's something coming out of that might prompt an update, or a change in state policy that would drive our projections or employment or housing projections. Not exactly sure of the details of where that might go, but that might have something there, since it was a major announcement just last night.
It's up front and wants permission to see a SDP that's online for the Cultural Arts Center in Columbia.
Okay.
You should have get the
Hey,
comment.
Jeff, you're not muted. No, you're good. It's all good here. So that was a thought. Any other ideas, suggestions, local topics? Okay, well, if you think of any, or an idea pops up, just shoot Matt an email, and he'll start vetting a topic and for future agendas. So. Okay, if any other business for the good of the group? Any other updates, business? Okay, if there's nothing there, then we can adjourn the meeting. So next will be April 22nd, and we will see everybody then. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
All right.